Welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. I'm also having, a Monday on a Tuesday that I'm recording. Anyway, welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. As you know, I'm Meg. And if you don't know me, where have you been? One, but two, welcome. We're glad to have you. So, as you know, Ministry Mondays with Meg is about ministry, right? Because it's in the title, but it's about ministry that goes on beyond what's happening in the traditional church. So today I have a new friend, Grace Pomroy, with me today, author, and all over like she's does some really cool stuff. So I'm gonna let Grace, one, thank you for doing this, and two, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and we'll just go from there.
That sounds great, Meg. Thank you so much for having me here. It is so much fun to make a new ministry friend. So it is a pleasure to be here. As Meg mentioned, my name is Grace Pomroy. I'm the director of the Stewardship Leaders Program at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. But the confusing part is I work remotely for the seminary. So despite living in Minnesota for 16 years, I actually live in a tiny town on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. So that's where I am. And I am passionate about all things money. So when it comes to talking about money with our students at the seminary, when it comes to talking with couples about their relationship with money, when it comes to thinking about churches and how they can find a more sustainable pathway forward, that is my lane. I'm also a certified financial educator. So when I'm not talking about money, you can generally find me hiking or baking in my kitchen because those are my two big passions.
Ooh. Okay, so I learned something new. I didn't realize that you were over in Washington. I'm saying this because I'm in Pennsylvania, so I'm like picturing the map in my head and going over in Washington. And you said, how long have you been there?
In Washington State, we've only been there for 2 years.
And then how long have you been teaching for the seminary?
So I was at the seminary twice, actually. This is my boomerang period. But yeah, I've been at the seminary actually since March of 2020. A really great time to start a new job. Highly recommend.
Also did the same thing. I started here March 1st, 2020.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, 100%. But we're still here. So, there's that.
There is
Um,
that.
there's so you love to talk about so the first question I have that popped in my head is do you ever watch I'm sure you must, you watch the people on the TV, on the news channels and things like that. You don't? You don't like
Mm-mm.
okay. Because sometimes they seem a little crazy to me, so I don't pay much attention to them. Like,
Same,
okay.
same.
Okay. How about people like Dave Ramsey?
Mm,
I mean, I've done the class
interesting.
I've done the class thing, but I didn't it, yeah.
Yeah, Dave Ramsey is quite a character, and in the last few years, he's been letting out even more of his character for us
Oh,
to feast upon and enjoy. Yeah, Dave is interesting, but what I often like to remind people is that really 80 to 90% of what Dave is teaching is common financial wellness stuff.
okay.
So I'm really grateful for the work that he's doing and spreading some of the pieces that people are like, wait, that's a Dave Ramsey thing, and I'm like, no, like
No.
that actually was around like way before Dave Ramsey, and I'm
Yeah.
really glad he made it public. But of course, there are some pieces of what Dave wants to do that don't make sense for a lot of people. So really,
That
my passion is just helping people to find their particular lane because personal financial wellness is way more about personal than it is about financial. So most of the conversations I have with people are saying, how do you find your own style? Like, yeah, I can teach you how to budget, but if you're someone who does things on pen and paper and I'm teaching you how to do it in a spreadsheet, it's never going to work for you. So helping people find their style and similar with congregations, helping them find their style is so vitally important.
so that is that something that you do regularly work with, and that's something as who I am, and I think with most people, I really appreciate that you're not it can only be one way, my way or no way kind of thing. That you listen, pay attention, that goes with this person. I can't do spreadsheets. I'm gonna have to do it on pencil and paper. Um, and so there's something about the tactile of the pen and paper for me, I guess. But so is who are your like your primary people that you work with? Is it more with individuals, more with churches? Is it a good mix?
It's a mix of
Like
both. The
both.
individuals that I work with right now are mainly with our students at the seminary. So it's a privilege to get to sit down with them as they think through their financial lives. It's an absolute blast. And students at our seminary are across the age spectrum. So I have students who are into their 70s, I have students who are just out of college, and everything in between. So my conversations can look like talking about retirement to trying to figure out your first budget because you've never had to budget for your own expenses before, and everything across the gamut. And then with congregations, it's similar. Every congregation is so different in terms of where they are in their process of their financial life. And particularly as many of our congregations are experiencing a season of financial decline, there's just a lot of emotions that we have to deal with as well. And so one of my privileges is not being trained as a counselor, but just sitting with them in the midst of the grief
Mm,
as we also process the financial reality. I think having some emotional skills and honestly a seminary education with some pastoral skills as well has really given me the skills to sit with these folks to
mm,
say, what are we grieving? Where are we finding hope? And what's a possible pathway forward that's designed for us and not just some sort of cookie cutter template that was pulled off a shelf?
mm. Yeah. Uh, I wish I would have. I wish I would have known you when I was serving as pastor. I could definitely see how that would be to have somebody that, other than the pastor, that could sit there and say that, like, what, and talk about that grief. And I mean, I'm sure it must be that anticipatory loss kind of thing. What are we losing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of anticipatory loss, and honestly, a lot of feelings of failure tend to pop up for people, especially people who've been around the church for a long time, and all of those, really committed members who maybe have served on the church councils, for decades, who believe, "Did we do something wrong? This worked decades ago, and we're trying the same things, and I think we're doing it even better than we did it decades ago, and yet it still isn't working the way we want it to." And you begin to wonder, is it us? Did we
Mm,
fail? Did we let down the people before us? And often the conversation that I have with them is really processing some of those longings and losses,
mm,
finding hope in the midst of that, but also saying that maybe it's actually the system of how we have funded church that has actually let us down in this moment.
mm,
Maybe for so long that worked for us, it worked in a season, because I think so many of us, and it's true, all of us who've been alive and are in the church today have only experienced this one system where we fund our congregations through tithes and offerings. And we haven't often taken a step back to say, wait, church wasn't always funded that way. And this system that has served us well for a season comes with pros and cons. So, can we have a conversation to say, maybe tithes and offerings need to play a different role as we head into this next season of ministry?
mm. Wow. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, trying to imagine funding the church beyond tithes and offerings. Like, what would that look like? And more like projects? I mean, is that where we're going? Is
Yeah,
that
so there's so much variety in terms of how people are doing this work. So when I came to this role in 2020, I was invited by the director of innovation for Luther Seminary to say, what does a more sustainable model for ministry look like? And I had no idea. I had no idea, Meg, what I was getting myself into. I was looking for some cookie cutter solutions that I could take off the shelf, and there just wasn't a lot out there. But there were a lot of congregations who were doing this work. So my students and I began doing some case studies, hearing some of their stories. And then in 2022, we did a research project where we talked to over 100 congregations who were trying some different things to hear what they were trying. And some of the things that emerged were a lot of congregations are using their space differently. Surprise, surprise. They're thinking about renting out their space. They're thinking about selling pieces of their property. But they're also doing things like starting a social enterprise that isn't just all charity based, but actually might bring in some income. They're also soliciting grants, not just from a denomination or from a judicatory body, but are actually finding granting agencies within their community that might be willing to support them in particular projects, which often comes as a surprise because people assume I'm a congregation. We can't take grant funds. In fact, there's even more grants that are available. And there are also a lot of ways that congregations are rethinking their staffing models to say, wait, is this the best for us? Might we want to move to a part time ministry model or having multiple part time pastors? And what might that mean both for the leaders, but also for the congregation itself? But one of the things that shocked me was just like the ideas are so many. Our other income source box was my favorite part of the survey because people were like, we're putting on theater productions and we're accepting tickets for that. We created a skate park that also produces income for us. We have a digital sign where we lease out advertisements. Like you name it, we saw it. I was like, what? What even is this? It was so awesome to see just the amount of different ways that people are engaging in this that are not just for the sake of making money so that we can keep our church alive, but are actually new ways that they are living out their mission, connecting with their community, and following God to the places where God already is out in their neighborhood.
That's that's beautiful and brilliant. And when you're not panicked, like when you do this, okay, I could let's do this before we get to that part where we go, is it time to sell the building and close up shop? Like let's go this long before we even like, yeah. I mean, I didn't think about the digital sign and leasing it. Those are things I wouldn't have thought of. I mean, I've always been a big fan of finding different ways to supplement the building's, income because what it sits empty, all
Yes.
but this little bitty piece. But wow, to be able to go, yeah, what can I really use this for? And that you've connected it with our I mean, that's just that's beautiful. So did you like grow up knowing that money was the thing you wanted to talk about? I mean, like, how did you get here?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you. It is a very weird story. So, no, absolutely not. I did not grow up thinking that money was going to be my thing. I thought I might want to teach. That was kind of a common theme that kept coming up. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to that from an early age. But money didn't come up for me actually until my dad sat me down and said, Grace, I see you want to study religion in college, but I'm really worried about you getting entangled in church politics and all that churchy stuff is a little nerve wracking to me. And we grew up a family of faith. My parents are still people of faith, but he was just really worried about that piece for me. And he said, I really want you to have one practical major. So I want you to double major. You can have religion, and then I need you to choose another one. And it looks like you're doing really great in math and physics this year, your senior year of high school. You need to pick another one. It's like, okay. So I went to college. I explored the idea of doing physics and I explored the idea of doing mathematics. And it was just easier to put math and religion together at the college I went to. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. Like, I just thought there's something about this that really sticks with me. And I took math of finance in college and was like, yes, the practical side of math, there's something interesting here. And then what really stuck it for me was I went to seminary right out of college. And my mom sat me down as she was helping me get ready in my seminary room and told me that I was going to have to pay a whole bunch of bills that I hadn't paid in college. And then she left. That was the last thing she said before she left. And I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know how to budget. I didn't know how to get a job. I was just so panicked. And I'm sure she didn't intend that. I know she had the best of intentions and I know she would help me along the way, but I'm sure she was just nervous. So she left the conversation till the end. So we decided to think through what is this even look like for me. And luckily at that time, the program I now lead at Luther Seminary was offering financial coaches to students. And so I signed up right away. I said, I need that. I need so much help. Like I can do the mathematics behind this, but like I have no idea how to do this for myself. Like give me some help. And so I was connected with a recent grad of the seminary who taught me how to do this step by step. And then, yeah, I needed a part-time job, and she knew that the Stewardship Leaders Program, the program I now work for, was hiring. I'd never heard the word stewardship in my life growing up Assemblies of God, but thought, like I can get coffee, I can make copies, I can do all of this, and stumbled in, and I was like, wait a minute, this is about so much more. Stewardship is about everything belonging to God, that we belong to God, that our stuff belongs to God, the earth belongs to God, our money belongs to God. I want to learn more. So my interview turned into a 30-minute stewardship sermon by the person who was leading the program at the time. And while many folks probably would have been turned away, I was all in. I was like, I'm really curious to learn more about this. And I have never lost the desire to learn more about stewardship, and particularly to think about how that relates to the ways that we live with money, not just what we give away, but really how we think more comprehensively about our lives with money and our lives of faith.
I mean, what a gift from your dad. And sorry, Mom, but I mean, that I can't imagine what that must have felt like. Like, here's congratulations, here you go. But also,
You won.
yeah, exactly. Thanks, Dad. I mean, for insisting that I do something, but Mom. Uh, um, so it's like in these conversations that you have with students, is there warning about student loans and that whole debt trap?
Yeah, so there's a couple different pieces of that puzzle. So I'm very blessed to work for a seminary that has what we like to call the Jubilee Scholarship, which means that every single one of our students who is admitted today attends without having to pay tuition because of our generous donors. And that has changed the entire system. I know. It's pretty incredible. Honest to goodness, it has changed the whole landscape in terms of financial education. When I was a student, that was not the case 10 years ago. And so it's really been an incredible experience. That being said, we still have students who borrow. And so my biggest piece for them is not just helping them ensure that they're borrowing the right amount, but helping to make sure they're borrowing from the right place. Because often our students will get very entrepreneurial about where they want to borrow from. Sometimes they're out seeking their own private loans in the marketplace, or they are getting student debt. And some of that's because our seminary is tuition free. So they forget that there are options to get loans from the seminary. And even that our seminary has our own loan program that we do offer, where part of that can be paid back, or part of it can be forgiven or canceled. I forget the words that we use, if you are in ministry for 3 years. So there are lots of good options for debt if students need that. And oftentimes our students do occasionally need that. If you're going out on internship, at least in my denomination I'm a part of, you're not getting paid a lot of money. And especially for our students who are stepping down from a career where they were making quite a bit, going to a $2,000 a month stipend, which, let's be honest, doesn't even often cover a full mortgage payment or rent payment, is a big deal. And so sometimes you do need some support. And so I'm often the one helping them see what kind of support do you exactly need, and how do we get you those loans that fit your needs. And with the expansion of public service loan forgiveness, helping our students who are eligible for that program to get access to it as well.
What a gift that, I mean, that would have been to me, to somebody like me, to have somebody to have, well, one, the whole Jubilee thing. I mean, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's amazing.
That's beautiful. And what pressure that takes off of you when you're a new pastor in this call, and then you get that bill and go, I can't do this.
No, I totally understand.
Yeah, wow. wow. What I mean, I hope they realize. I hope they realize that this that it is an incredible blessing and gift that they've been given, because that's not the case for most people, or at least most that are my age that I know anyway. Wow.
No, they
Yeah.
definitely do. That is why many of our students come to us, and why our seminary has really been able to open up to a more ecumenical base of people who say, "I really cannot go to seminary unless it is tuition free." Now, as you and I both know, Meg, there's a lot of other costs to go to seminary besides just tuition. So I
Right.
always have to remind people of that. But especially for our students who live near the Twin Cities, for whom traveling to campus for intensives is pretty inexpensive. It's a very easy thing to do because of Jubilee.
Mhm.
And I would say that at least the majority of our students, they don't even know how to begin to express our gratitude to our donors
Mhm.
because it has meant so much in their lives, and so much in their ministry journey.
Yeah.
It really has allowed students who would never have had the opportunity otherwise to join us.
Yeah. Um, I mean, big shout out to Luther Seminary and other seminaries who
Yes, there are plenty of
do
others too.
do the same thing, because that is truly, truly a gift and an awesome, awesome blessing. Um, so do you find, because something that I'm realizing, is as our congregations age and, perhaps one of the spouses has passed away, things happen in relationships, um, then you have a spouse who had nothing to do with the household funds and is kind of like you that day at college, who goes, now what do I do? I mean, do you work with those kind of folks, or do you have recommendations for those kind of people?
Yeah. So I would say that often I get to work with my students prior to that point, just given the ages of who I tend to serve.
Mhm.
Occasionally, I get to touch students who are at that point. In fact, I was just talking to someone earlier this year for whom that was the case. But my biggest point that I make to people, even if you say, I'm not a money person, my partner has this completely under control. I don't want to feel like I'm getting in their way or stepping on their toes. I get where you're coming from. Biggest thing is access. You need to make sure that you have access to all of the accounts, all of the shared accounts. And I'm amazed. My husband and I have tested out this process at how often, like, I think I've done all the steps to get him connected, and I've said, "Hey, this is our site. I want you to follow the process without. I'll be sitting there, but I'm not going to tell you anything." And it's amazing to me how many traps we've fallen into, especially with two-factor authentication, which is, of course, a great thing with security, but it actually can mean that a partner can get locked out. The other pieces, of course, are thinking about beneficiaries and powers of attorney. It's very, very important to make sure that you get the access when you need it. So I'm thinking about not just after your partner is deceased, but if they were to be incapacitated for any reason, would you still be able to access the things that you need? So thinking through those, of course, with an attorney, or with a CPA, probably both, thinking through what you need most, I think is very, very important. But the other thing I would say is that in my experience, most people who say, I'm not a money person, what they mean is, I'm not interested in the day to day tasks. Like, I don't want to be the one who has to pay the electric bill and remember that it's due on the 15th. Like, I don't particularly care that you're following this particular budget app system. Like, I don't care. I just want to know there's enough money left for the things that I need. But they do care about financial goals, care
Oh.
a lot about having a conversation around retirement. Like, this person may want to really retire at age 67, or
Mm.
they really care about the fact that their kids receive half of the funding towards their college education. So if that is something you care about, and in my experience, that's most people, then have a conversation around the goals. Focus less on the day-to-day stuff unless your partner is inviting you into that. I do think it can be helpful to have one person who's really focused on that, or two people if you're willing to share those tasks. But make sure you're on the same page for those goals. And that will allow for continuity. Should something happen to one partner, that allows for continuity for that person's goals to also still be lived out should anything happen to them. And having those shared goals, I think, really allows you to then have shared success and shared achievement, and really brings you together as a couple too.
I didn't see that coming. Like that they answered with goals. I mean, but I like that. I mean, that it's okay that one person does that day-to-day stuff. And it's not necessarily like, I know people go like, but that just means they have to be in control. Okay, well that's another issue if it's a
It's a
control
big
thing.
issue. Yes,
But
yes.
but to the shared goals, that's a whole, I like that. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, is is that something that you then, would that, does that transfer over to the church then when you go and work with a congregation? Is it
Hmm.
like, is that like the question, what is the goal for the congregation? What is it, just
Yeah.
to keep the doors open? What, you know?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about that. I've never had anybody ask that in that way. But the biggest question I often ask congregations is, what is your mission? And you and I were joking earlier before we started the camera about our Sunday school answers. And so
Yeah,
oftentimes people will say, like, our mission is to love our neighbors and spread the gospel. Love that. What
yeah,
does that actually mean for you in this time and place? One of the quotes that I love, and I'm not going to get it right, from Mark Demas, is this idea that we can't change the whole world as one congregation individually, but we might be able to make an impact on a neighborhood, on a zip code, on an apartment complex. Like, we can begin to have some focus. And that doesn't mean we aren't following the Great Commission or living into the greatest commandment. It just means we're saying this is the particular piece of the pie that God is inviting us to tend to in this moment, that God is inviting us to join in God's work with in this moment. And so that's the biggest thing I invite congregations to do, is really to sit down and say, what is that thing that we are called to do? Because most of the congregations that I sit with, if they get really honest about their mission statement, and often we'll do this in a funny way through saying you need to tweet, I know that's going to date myself,
yeah,
but tweet your mission statement, or you need to do a GIF of what does your budget say, or what would people behind closed doors say your mission statement really is, not that pretty one that's embroidered on a quilt in your fellowship hall.
right.
And it's to keep the doors open and the lights on.
Mm,
That is the mission that we've been living with for so long. And as much as we'd like to paste over it, the Great Commission, the greatest commandment, and I do believe in our hearts, we believe that what our money and our budgets actually say about us is self preservation.
mhm.
And self preservation is, I don't think, what God is calling us to. Like, as I look across
Oh,
the Bible, I do not see a move to saying, how can we keep the doors open and the lights on? I see a God who is inviting us to reach out to our neighbors, to be really focused on how we can best do that, knowing that we cannot touch every single person. And
mhm,
being all things to all people, while it may have served us well in one stage of the church's ministry, and I'm not even sure that it did then, but we can argue about that,
right.
is not what we're called to do today. So, what is God inviting us to do in this particular moment? And it's amazing to me, once you get that clarity and focus, the amount of impact that you can have in your community, even as a small group of people. And I've watched this happen in the rural congregation that I'm a part of right now. We're located in a small town of 5,000 people. Our congregation has anywhere in the neighborhood of 25 to maybe on the upper end 40 people on a Sunday morning between online and in person. And as I was putting together our stewardship letter for this year, I was amazed to see the enormous impact. Some researchers would call it the halo effect that our congregation has in our
Hmm,
community, because we've really focused in to say we care about feeding our neighbors. So we helped to start a food program, and we care about the children of our community having access to childcare. So we started a childcare center. Um, and it's really, really incredible, like, to see the 40 people impacting 80 kids in our childcare center and over 160 families being fed through our food program. Just with
And you
40 people
and you've done this in a small town of
in a small town.
yeah, that's awesome.
It's not
And
just
but
the big congregations that make a difference.
yeah, those little churches that not that the little churches that could, the little churches that can
And
and
are.
are, yes. That's awesome. Way to go. I mean, that 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 they're like, okay, these are the things, these are what we wanna and I agree that you're exactly right that we've done that. We've got to be all things to all people, always, always, because we were in 1954. Okay, you were in 1954, but this isn't 1954, and
No.
life changes. Um, thank God it's not 1954. Um, but the world we live in changes, evolves, and so do we as people. And that, what a great way to really go. What is it that God is calling us to do? And not all of these things, but let's focus this, and this is how we're gonna spend our time, our talents, and this is where we're gonna give it. I love this kind of thing. So the books you write, the things you teach, you don't have to have a degree. There are even for those people that say, I'm not a math money
Yeah.
kind of person, right? This is material for the me's, the I don't math well.
Yeah. Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. So the book that I just wrote on more sustainable economic models for ministry, which I realize that phrase, even you're like, is that
Mhm,
for me though? Because like you just said economic model, and I don't even know what that looks like. It absolutely is. It's more about the mission than it is about the money. That's the biggest thing that I say. And in fact, ministry leaders, I think, are the most well positioned for this because you've got the mission on the radar. Like
mhm,
you have
mhm,
that. And I hope there are lay members in your congregation that do too. Don't hear me wrong. But I would say that is one of the key roles that a ministry leaders can play is keeping the eye on the mission. But the great news is you've got a lot of other people in your congregation who are probably eager to get involved in this work that would never raise their hand for the other lists of tasks that we often ask people to do. So they may not
mhm.
want to be a reader or a greeter or a Sunday school teacher. But when you say, hey, like we're kind of playing around with this idea of starting a social enterprise that can help out youth in our community, and you've got some business skills, like would you be willing to take a look at this business plan? I bet they're gonna be really excited,
Yeah.
to look over your shoulder, or people who say, like my dad, for instance. My dad served on his one and only church committee when I was in 6th grade, and I still remember him coming home after the first meeting and saying, "Grace, I will never serve on a church committee again." And he's right, he still hasn't. He hasn't done it. But you ask him to pick up his tools and go, and he'll do it. You wanna make your space ready for a renter to come in, you ask Bob to come and take care of that. Like, he would be really excited to be a part of that. One of his current roles he's playing in his congregation today is he's the one who makes the desserts for funerals, and he loves it because he drops off the desserts and leaves. He doesn't have to attend the funeral, he doesn't have to talk to anybody, he just drops them off and goes. And so think about those people in your congregation who often struggle to find a place to bring their gifts. What we have found is that this process tends to tap those people in ways that they never expected with something that really lights them up and brings them joy and is often related to their own hobbies, skills, and sometimes even the jobs that they do every day.
I love this that no, you that it's okay to say, "I won't do this thing because that's not my thing." But here are
Yes.
the things
Yes.
that like, I'll make the funeral desserts because that
Yes.
is an important it it's like the show it's a ministry. It
It
is.
is.
It's a mi because some of us don't bake. I don't do that don't ask me to do those things. I'll do the other things, but not that. But um, yeah, because the church needs all of the people and all of the gifts and all of the skills. And I yeah, I really like this that it can't and but just inviting different ways of thinking, different models of ministry, the whole, I've long said that we can't keep doing it the same way, but with the whole when innovating and all of that. Okay, so I really like the idea with the teenagers or the youth.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got business when you come and talk to them, because so many of our young people now are multifaceted, like their income streams. They don't want to just do like my middle child is 21. Doesn't want to just do like one thing for the rest of their life. But that's them like, oh, you know. But also I've got to pay rent and I've got to pay bills and things like that. But I don't want to just be stuck in this one career for. I think people that can do that and can see that and tell people that this is okay, that we don't have to have 4-year college degrees. We don't have to have many college degrees anymore. We need people in the trades. And it's okay if you do these different models. So what have you learned? I realize you write books, so you could like literally like give me, but like, are there takeaways from like the big aha moments, like what you've learned on this journey?
For sure. So a couple of big learnings. The biggest learning for me is that I was amazed to see that we now have real data to back up the idea that when people step out of their spaces in these ways, or they do ministry differently, that it's actually opening up unexpected opportunities to connect with people and share about their ministry in new ways. So not only are they just finding sources of income, they are living out their mission. Now, these are not always going to be people who are going to come sit in your pews on a Sunday morning. We cannot view this as transactional. I hope that viewers of this already understand this, but again, I'm just going to underline that this is not a transaction. But it amazed me to see the amount of stories that we heard of people who said, yeah, like even something as simple as we reached out for a grant from this organization and we ended up forming a new partnership with them, or we decided to open up our space in this new way. And it's amazing the people who are coming through our doors who said, we didn't even know this congregation existed. And while we'll never be here on a Sunday morning, this is helping us gain trust in who the church is and giving us a different narrative than what we might be seeing on TV about what we think churches are and churches are about. And funny enough, like it's funny how people in the community will begin to hear those stories. So it's not the direct transactions, but kind of the second and third hand folks for whom God is already working in their lives who might say, wow, like I want to be a part of a church that does that. I want to be a part of a church that is opening up their space in that way, or a part of our church who is reaching our youth in this way. And that tends to be the people who are drawn in by this. It's kind of second or third hand out of this. So that's a big aha moment. The other big aha moment for me was seeing how God is at work in this. We asked at the end of our survey, and it was a very long survey. And I expected people to have survey fatigue and just like be like, nope, we're done. I'm just going to hit submit. We said, where are you seeing God at work in what you're doing? And I thought people would give me like the traditional Sunday school answer, Meg. Like I thought they would be like, God is everywhere. Submit. Because it was a long survey. Like I wouldn't doubt them. We had 101 responses. We received over 90 qualified responses to that question of people going into detail of how they were seeing God show up. I still remember sitting down at my kitchen table over Christmas break in 2022 and reading their responses one by one. And I wept. I wept because I think in the season of decline, it's easy to believe that God has left us. That God has forgotten us, that the gospel is declining, not just our church is declining. And I'm here to say from the 101 congregations I had a chance to talk to, we heard a very different story. God was showing up. God was making a way forward with peace. There were big and small miracles happening all over the place in our data set. And as somebody who grew up in a tradition where we talked a lot about miracles, and I often became a little skeptical of like, does God really show up in those big ways today? This really reinvigorated my faith to say,
Mhm.
yes, God is showing up. God is doing big things in our community. And in fact, by leaning into these practices, it's allowing us to see God at work in new ways. So those were really the biggest aha moments for me.
And are those in the book?
They are.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not
Oh,
one to
yes.
really read a whole lot of I'm honest, I'm not the financial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Um,
the heartbeat of the book is the 12 congregations that we went deep with in our interview process. So if you like storytelling and hearing stories that are just that are in big and small ways, like I said, there's not it's not like we're only going to show you those kind of big miracle moments. We really want to key in on some of the moments of struggle. Like there's a congregation in this book that decided to close and to sell its building and reopen in a different way, and that was a long multi-year process of grieving, of struggling as a congregation around their identity. You also have stories where really simple interactions made a big difference. I think of a congregation who now has a 4-point care center model. It started out as child care center with after school services, and now they serve people of all ages. And they did this in the 80s before this trend was even cool. And their whole process started because the pastor, on his third day on the job, new seminary grad, walks outside of the congregation on his way to the parsonage, stumbles across 3 single moms, all named Barbara, who said, "Hey, we're really struggling to come pick up our kids from school at 3 p.m. when we have jobs. Can the church do something about this?" And those 3 Barbaras changed the entire face of this congregation's life.
oh my gosh. Well, now I know why you sat there and wept over all these stories because
I know.
I can just imagine, I mean, how 3 Barbaras,
Yeah.
and being a mom and how yeah, wow, and that the church says, "Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that." Um, so is the book out now?
It is out now. Yes, it came out in September
Mhm.
17th. It's out, and yeah, it's available. And we are also at Faith Lead, which is the area of Luther Seminary that I work for. We're giving away a free chapter. So if you are a try before you buy kind of person like I am, check it out. See if it suits you. We're also giving away a free research ebook. So if you are a data nerd like me, like don't worry, you can dive deep into the details. You can also get that for free on our website as well. And if you want to dive as deep as possible into what we have to offer on this, the book is a great way to do that. I really try my best to mix in stories, practical ideas, as well as some of those financial pieces of the puzzle, really geared towards ministry leaders to read this
Mhm.
together in their congregational setting so that a pastor could read this alongside of their entrepreneur that's in their context, and they could have a really diverse conversation. Or those church treasurer types who often have been beating the symbol about, hey, like we're kind of struggling more than people are giving us attention to for years and years. This book is also for them to say, yes, you are
So,
right.
do they is that on your website or is that the both school website? Where am
Yeah,
I
so
seeing?
I would encourage folks to go to Faith Lead. You can certainly come to my website and I will redirect you there. So don't worry, no matter where you land, you'll get where you need to be.
Okay.
But yes, we are giving away the free chapter and free research ebook on the Faith Lead site. If you aren't familiar with Faith Lead, we provide resources, webinars, coaching, and inspiration designed to help people who are following God into a faithful future. We want to resource you for that journey as you follow God into what God has for you.
So we will, folks, for those listening, for those watching, we will put that in the show notes for you, so you know right where to go and do your little preview, and then my book. Um, so I got to give you the last question, though. I got to
Yeah.
okay. So the joy question. If you've been here before, you know how this goes. So all of these fantastic things that you do, I never thought I would enjoy a conversation about money because it's stewardship. It's different, and it's actually really beautiful. But so all these things that you do in your life, and what is one thing that brings you joy?
Oh man, I could sit here and give you a litany. But I think one of the pieces related to this conversation that gives me joy when I work with students and when I work with congregations is inviting them to consider how their faith connects to the way that they use their money. And oftentimes, this is the first time they've been asked that question. It makes them a little bit nervous, especially when you say, how might the Holy Spirit be guiding you in your relationship with money? People get a little panicky. But what brings me joy is when people say, wow, I never thought of that before. What might I do with this? I think about a student I taught this summer who said, maybe I'm being called to pray about my life with money. And I've never done that before. And it feels a little scary, but I want to give it a try. And she did. And it's just those moments where people begin to say, wait, God cares about all of my life, including my life with money. And there might be more ways for me to live out my faith than just giving my money away. Those aha moments bring me a deep amount of gratitude and joy.
Wow. And see, in 72, 73 episodes, no two answers have been the same, which is what I love. And really, honestly, how I can see this be for more than just, one type of person. And I really appreciate that ministry from someone who money has always been an issue, So it it makes it less scary. It makes it makes up that guilt around it, those kind of things. But so I appreciate you and your ministry and this gift and how you use it. And that you use it for the glory of the kingdom. And I just love that. So I thank you for your time, for being on the show. I'll put all the links to Grace's website, to Luther Seminary, in case, the Spirit were to be calling you in seminary direction as well. They're also
Absolutely.
way for faith leads, so you can read all the free stuff and then go buy the book. And so, again, I'm just so grateful for you and for this ministry that you have and that you share it and you do it with such joy. You do.
Oh, thank you, Meg. It has been such a pleasure to be here and be in conversation with you.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure to have you. And folks, check Grace Pomroy out and her book. And we thank everyone for watching. See you again next time.